Hello, everybody. Happy New Year, and welcome to our second free Zoom presentation to learn more and get connected into the canyoneering community. I hope everybody had a great holiday season. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm stoked for 2025 and descending to canyons. And what a great way to start than to remind ourselves how to be safe and talking about search and rescue. Just a few announcements. If you're not a member of the Coalition of American Canyoneers yet, please go to our website. You can join, it's free. And when you go over there, bop on over and get yourself a hoodie because you can't be at the trailhead without a CAC hoodie. It's just something you got to have for 2025. I saw it in Vogue. Um, so that being said, please join. We have some really exciting things coming up, more announcements at the end of different presentations we're doing. And questions will also be at the end. So please hold your questions, but do drop where you are coming from and what can you're excited to do. And after you join, we look forward to staying in touch this year with all the different projects and things we have going on. So before there was InReach and Spot and Delorme, there was Search and Rescue, SAR, SAR, whatever you want to call it. For many, many decades, there has been SAR for people that have come out and they're like us. They want to enjoy the outdoors while feeling safe. And before we had any of the satellite communication, SAR would go out and just try to find people and use tracking techniques. So we've come a long way with the different strategies we have, and it's important to know what are the different rescue techniques. What happens when things go wrong in a canyon and you can't self-rescue? Today we have Rob Klusman. He has been a member of the Sierra Madre Search and Rescue since 1996. So this guy, he has seen some stuff. He's been around, and we're looking forward to getting an update from him and learning more about what they deal with in their areas and just overall learning more safety. And a special shout out for all those in Southern California affected by the fires right now. I know we have a lot of canyoneers in that community, and we want to let you know that we're thinking about you guys. We've done a project, a cleanup project in Eaton Canyon before, and we hope to come back and unite together after these fires go out. But we're thinking about you guys, and if you need anything, let us know. We'll be hoping that this resolves soon and everybody is safe. So for now, I'm just going to turn it right over to our presenter with all the experience. Let me do that. All right, you should be good to go. You just need to turn your
All right,
video and
Cam.
audio on.
All right, Cam, can you hear me? I hope everybody can hear me. I've got my audio up.
We
All
can
right,
hear you.
I should see some thumbs up. That's good. That means we're good to go. Let me switch into sharing here as well, and I'll get my deck up. First of all, thank you everybody for allowing me the opportunity to join the group today and present. I see a lot of very familiar faces, or names, and faces, I should say. A lot of folks I know from the local canyoneering community and people that are on other search and rescue teams, so fellow SAR folks, as well as people I've seen at the different canyons and encountered along the way or had conversations with. So it's a real pleasure to be here today and to talk about a little bit about what we do here in Southern California, and specifically in the mountains right above Sierra Madre, right along the front range of the San Gabriels. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of what to expect in terms of search and rescue operations. And then I'll share some of the breaking news or information that we know today about the outcomes or the aftermath of the Eaton fire and kind of where we stand with respect to that. I'm happy to answer questions at the end of the presentation. And I'm sure there's a lot of you with a lot of SAR and canyoneering experience that can weigh in on a lot of these points as well. So with that, we'll jump in. Interestingly enough, the Sierra Madre Search and Rescue Team actually was formed as the result of a rescue in a canyon. In fact, it was Bailey Canyon in August of 1951 when a young man named Walter Weirich, who was from Altadena, went for a hike in Bailey Canyon and never showed up at home, never made it out, and was out overnight. And the next day, family and friends in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department began looking for Walter, but they were not having any luck to a large extent because many of the people looking for Walter were unfamiliar with the area. They weren't familiar with the canyons. They didn't know about the little ins and outs of those canyons. They didn't know about the waterfalls that were in a lot of the canyons. So that was a kind of a challenge in terms of the access that they had um, to locate Walter. And of course, anybody at the time that went into the canyons or into the mountains looking for Walter that were not part of the official search, i.e., part of the sheriff's department, were threatened with arrest. And that included a number of folks that were outdoorsmen from Sierra Madre, just to the east there, or just to the southeast, I guess I should say, who basically took it on themselves to go into the canyon when no search results were happening. So Larry Shepard and Fred Lalone managed to argue their way into the field. And in fact, I knew Larry. I did not know Fred, but he's the kind of person that you'd expect could argue their way past a law enforcement person. He was that kind of a personality, strong-willed, headstrong, wasn't going to take no for an answer. And they quickly found Walter's track as they dropped down into Bailey Canyon and found that Walter had actually descended down the first couple of drops in Bailey. And or a number of you I know have been in Bailey and found that he had gone quite a ways down to the first really big waterfall that drops down there, kind of the sloping, I guess it's about an 80, 90-foot fall or so that's there. But this is after 3 days he had been in the canyon, and Walter was severely dehydrated and actually pretty near to death. The team effected a rescue, or I should not say the team as much as it was Larry and Fred and a few other folks that they had commandeered as part of this exercise, pulled Walter out, and they decided that they needed to organize a real search and rescue team and do this in a formal way instead of an ad hoc way, and to figure out how to become part of the official system, if you will, on it. And so the Sierra Madre Search and Rescue Crew at the time was founded in September of 1951. So that's a bit of the history of the team, starting with a successful rescue of a young man in one of the local canyons. Whoops. We're one of the first mountain rescue teams in California, arguably the quote unquote first. Depending on which team you ask, different folks will have slightly different start dates and founding dates. But we trace our founding again formally back to 1951. Lots of lessons early on in the team were learned from the experience of some of the men that served in the Korean War, particularly some of the skills that they learned around organizing and structuring a small team of individuals to function autonomously in difficult conditions. There were lots of opportunities to innovate and learn along the way, including the introduction of bloodhounds in search and rescue, and a number of other innovative kind of things that they did, including some of the first use of helicopters and what they called heli jumping or heli-tack at the time, where they came in off of a hovering helicopter, and at the time it was the small bells that they used in the Korean War, and literally jumped off the skid onto the ground, and they rolled like a paratrooper would roll to absorb the energy. They did that as a way to get inserted into difficult areas that would otherwise be hard to hike into. The team's motto is that we search for those lost in the wilderness, we rescue anyone needing help, and we prevent SAR through mountain safety education. Excuse me. And there you can see some early pictures of the team. Today, sorry, it keeps jumping ahead on my button here. The team today, there's 36 regular members. We currently have 8 probationary members on the team. We are one of 8 mountain search and rescue teams in Los Angeles County. So there are a lot of SAR teams working in the mountains here locally, primarily attached to the Sheriff's Department, and we operate as high-risk civilian volunteers under the auspices of the Sheriff's Department. We are an all-volunteer, nonprofit 501c3 organization, and we are a 24/7, 365-day-a-year Type 1 mountain rescue team, member of the Mountain Rescue Association. And we operate not only in our local area, but as a mutual aid resource through the California Office of Emergency Services, and can be sent anywhere in the state, or on a mutual aid call coming from other states. We can be sent to other states as well. And the team has done operations in Mexico, in Colorado, and even as far east as New York for a missing individual. Um, just from a kind of a give people a sense for uh, what the training to operational ratio is, it's about 2.5 to 3 hours of training for every single hour of operational time that we spend. So the vast majority of our time is not spent rescuing people or doing search and rescue operations, but it's really around training and building the skill set and maintaining the skill set necessary to do mountain rescue. And of course, a lot of the skills and uh, passion we bring to the table is through our own pursuit of outdoor activities and a love of those, whether it's climbing or mountaineering, backcountry skiing, or of course canyoneering as a big part of it. And we have a number of folks on the team that are quite active in the canyoneering community, in and go all over the place exploring canyons, whether it's in the desert Southwest or other places in Colorado and California and other locations. All right, so moving into kind of the heart of the presentation and to give people a sense of kind of where do canyoneers fit in the way that we think about the spectrum of people we deal with from a search and rescue standpoint. Canyoneers tend to be quite competent, well prepared, and are fairly rarely the subjects of a search and rescue operation, unless something unusual like an accident has happened and somebody's been injured in some way, and the team needs supplemental assistance in getting the person out of the canyon. Most canyoneers actually end up self-rescuing when an incident occurs, again, unless it's pretty serious or the circumstances are unusual. Like most of the mountain SAR organizations across the Western United States and in other parts of the country, we don't charge for rescue. Rescues in our services are free, and we'll work to get people out of the mountains. But once you're out of the mountains, and if we hand you off to an ambulance, whether it's a ground ambulance or an air ambulance or some other entity, that's when the meter starts running in terms of costs that you may incur. Many of those costs are covered by your health insurance, and it's always good to check to see what your health insurance covers vis-a-vis transport by ambulance in any form and what you might be liable for. But typically, we'll work to get you out of the mountains, and we'll make sure that we do that, and you're not going to get a big bill for it. In fact, if we pull you out and utilize one of the air assets that we have available to us, for instance, here in LA County, it's the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department or the Los Angeles County Fire Department. Those helicopter activities are free as well. That's covered as part of the taxpayers' uh, funding of emergency services. And a lot of times, if we pull somebody out that's severely injured and we pull them out by helicopter, we'll fly them directly to the hospital. So there's no, ambulance transport per se. They'll be taken right to the hospital. The LA County Fire Department copters and their crews and the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Air Rescue 5 are staffed with paramedics, so they're advanced life supported aircraft. And oftentimes they'll make the call to just transport somebody directly to a local trauma center if necessary. There is rescue insurance that exists, and I think most people are probably familiar with groups like Global Rescue that oftentimes offer insurance, or in many cases, it's through membership in groups like the American Alpine Club or organizations like that. And if you're operating any place like outside the United States or in some place where an evacuation might be particularly complicated or expensive, rescue insurance is always a good idea to help cover potential costs you might incur. Some jurisdictions, as many of you know, within the United States, will allow for cost recovery. And Grand County, Utah is a good example where, given the volume of recreational activity that they have and being a fairly small county from a resource perspective, there are costs that are looked to be recovered in many of those places. New Hampshire is another place where, depending on the situation, the authorities may choose to recover some component of the cost from the rescued individual or individuals as part of that. There are some opportunities to reduce the potential cost component of this. And it's not insurance, but there's the idea of the SAR cards, really started in Colorado initially, as well as now Utah and some other states have search and rescue assistance or similar card programs. They're not really insurance, but what they're designed to do is they're designed to help the local search and rescue agency that may incur costs in rescuing somebody to recover some of those costs. And many of those cards can be purchased directly through the the state entities or as part of like the Department uh, state wildlife departments oftentimes sell those. In the past, a lot of the programs were funded through hunters licensing fees and fishing license costs on that. So overall, I think the key takeaway here is, always seek to self-rescue if you can. But if you're in doubt at all or feel like the situation is beyond your ability to safely handle in a self-rescue kind of model, absolutely call for help. Whether you're triggering your inReach or sending somebody to get help or dialing SOS over your iPhone, don't wait to call for help. If you think that you need help, call for help. You're not going to incur cost. We'd like to come out and help you and mitigate the situation. And it's always easier to do that before the situation has escalated and become more complex or dangerous for everybody that's involved on it. All right, stepping down. So what actually happens when you dial 911 essentially or make that emergency call locally? And this is again kind of very specific to here in Southern California and the San Gabriels. Things generally behave somewhat similarly in other areas across the Western United States, but there are variations that you just need to be aware of. And certainly talking to your local search and rescue team folks, they can tell you about kind of how does the process spool up and roll out in their local area if they get a call. So notification, as I mentioned, satellite messaging or people that walk in to report somebody that's injured, or family member reports somebody overdue that should have been out several hours ago and they haven't showed up. Or in some cases, if there's cell phone coverage, straight up 911 oftentimes works, and you can either make a voice call or text. But it's not unusual, even close to the metropolitan area of Los Angeles, to get in one of these canyons and have absolutely no cell phone coverage at all, even though you may only be a short distance from millions of people on that. So whatever device you have a good way to communicate. And I think the satellite messaging devices are probably some of the very best. But please realize that inside a canyon, you are limited by the window or the view of the sky that your device has, and it may take a little while before the message can get picked up and sent out. You just have to be patient or to look for or find an open area, which increases your exposure to open sky where the satellite can pick up the messaging. Very importantly, and this is particularly if you call 911, the call takers may not be familiar with the area that you're in or the complexity and nature of a mountain rescue and what may be necessary to get a canyoneer out of a canyon if they're injured. And you want to make sure that whomever you talk to knows that it's a mountain rescue or a technical rescue and that the right resources are being dispatched. A lot of times, the vague information will mean that a fire department unit responds, and then they find out when they get to the trailhead somewhere that the place they need to go is 3 miles up the hill, and it's somebody that's in a canyon that's going to require hundreds of feet of rope to access, and they don't have the right resources there. And so it extends the operational time period to get the response underway because now they have to get the proper resources dispatched on this. A couple of key things to note, and in talking with Sonny Lawrence and others, and I will say we have encountered this before, please use general information that the public might know about the location that you're in. If you use insider names for a particular canyon or off of a particular trailhead, that may confuse things with the dispatcher because it's not going to show up on their map. They're not going to be able to geolocate or cross-reference it. And that information is going to be completely foreign to them because you're in many ways speaking kind of a different language. Feel free to pass that information on, and they can pass it on to us from a search and rescue standpoint when we respond, because we oftentimes are familiar with and know those insider names. Again, it's one of the benefits of having folks that are canyoneers and are familiar with these areas is we know what a lot of these places are, and we know how we're going to need to go to get there. So it already starts to give us a sense of what are we going to need to deal with in terms of affecting a rescue in that particular area. it oftentimes shocks people, but here in Southern California at least, we get a massive response on technical rescues into the canyons in many cases. It's kind of what we call the firehouse response. They send everything until they decide they don't need any more resources. And oftentimes that's multiple agencies due to jurisdictional issues and the area that the response is going into. So it's not uncommon to get a joint search and rescue response along with an extensive response from like Los Angeles County Fire Department or the San Bernardino County Fire Department in conjunction with at the rescue. And because of the technical rescue nature of the incident, oftentimes that means we'll get multiple engines and a urban search and rescue unit, as well as ambulances and a battalion chief. So it can get pretty hectic at the command post or at the trailhead when things jump off. And so just kind of expect that if you hit the emergency button on that. If you hit the SOS button on your Garmin or a similar device, please make sure that you're staying in communication with the communications center. Garmin Center is located in Texas. They know what they're doing. They're very good at answering, at getting answers to key questions and relaying that to the responding entities. And they're also very good at passing information on to you about what to expect about what's happening with respect to the rescue. If you decide for any reason that you don't need any help anymore and that the situation is stabilized and you're okay, let them know. Don't just turn off your device. Make sure they know what's going on with respect to the response. Particularly with the iPhones now, we have seen instances where people have decided they want to test to see if the 911 feature operates. They push the button and the SOS goes out, and they realize it's gone out, and they quickly shut it off, shut off their phone, turn off the thing, and we don't hear anything back. And we have now basically what we would call a 911 hang up, where we don't know what's happened. We don't know if there's still an emergency. And if we don't know there's still an emergency, we're still going to keep the full response rolling up there. And we've had some people very recently that were quite embarrassed when they came out of their hike and found that there were about 15 search and rescue people and a couple fire engines, and that they had been wondering why the helicopter was flying over the canyon when they had just, we wanted to test our iPhone SOS to see what it would do. It did what it was supposed to do, and then they kind of hung up and didn't tell anybody that they were okay and that it was a mistake. So please don't do that. So with that being said, what do we need to know? A couple of key things. The location and nature of the incident. Very helpful in planning the response. And if we know that you're a couple waterfalls down in the canyon, you're above, the number 3 waterfall or the 3rd waterfall, that's good information, because now we can start to plan how we access that point, and we're going to take that information and use it to develop our approach to affecting the rescue. We need to know the number of subjects, because if we have multiple subjects, that complicates things a great deal. And we need to know the medical situation. Is this a serious life-threatening situation, or we have somebody that has an injured leg, but they're stable otherwise and just not ambulatory and are going to need assistance getting out of their predicament on that. And again, most of the time it's a single subject that's injured. And luckily, the significant trauma component is fairly modest in most of the rescues that we see, although there definitely are exceptions. If there are any access considerations that we need to take into account that you can relay to us, please do that. Even if it's cryptic information and the dispatcher doesn't know what it might mean, it's very helpful for us, particularly with respect to any challenges or issues with anchors and access, any challenging issues with respect to water flow. If we know we have substantial water flow in the canyon, we need to know that as much as possible, because it'll help affect us develop the right attack plan and help us bring the right equipment as part of that. And oftentimes, I know the idea of PFDs and swift water stuff in canyons is not kind of the norm, but if we have somebody that may not have the ability to help themselves very much in some of these situations, we may need to look at kind of some swift water techniques and things to get them across pools or other areas where we have difficult water flow problems to address. So anything that you can capture related to that and relay to us is going to be helpful from a planning perspective. When you pass information along, don't hesitate to use canyon terminology around, the first waterfall or the second waterfall, or information about, canyon left versus canyon right. We know how to interpret that, and we'll make it make sense. A call that's going straight to the fire department may oftentimes cause confusion. If you're talking about the first waterfall, they're typically thinking about the first waterfall is the first waterfall at the bottom of the canyon, not the first waterfall when you drop in to descend the canyon. So those kinds of things are important. And again, the right resource responding is going to be able to interpret the information that you pass along and help inform the incident command folks about what are we looking at, where's our incident, and what are we going to have to do to access the subject. So what do we think about when we're responding after the notification's done? Safety first, last, and always on it. And it's, maybe not surprising, but we're going to look to team safety and individual safety on the responding entities first. And then we're going to look to the injured person and their party's safety second. But we will be very thoughtful and careful about taking undue risks ourselves to get somebody out that may be in a stable situation, and we can wait overnight to get them out, or develop an alternative rescue plan. So safety is always paramount, particularly if we don't have somebody that's in a life-threatening situation. Access, what do we need? Who has the beta about this canyon? And if it's a team member that's been down the canyon recently, we're going to apply all of their knowledge about what's going on. What do the different drops look like? What are the anchor situations that we may have to face? What's the water flow? What has the reporting party or the RP told us? Again, particularly how wet is our canyon is really important, because we look at not only the access issues, but we have medical care issues, and hypothermia is often a problem that we want to be able to address. On a rescue response, where we know we're going to be dealing with a canyon, the crews that we send in, everybody is carrying a rope, so that we have plenty of rope on scene, because we're going to take a very industrial approach to the rescue. It's not going to be clean and simple and minimalist like you would take if you were descending the canyon. We're going to look at maximum equipment that we need, so that we don't get into a situation where we find we don't have enough rope or are missing a vital piece of equipment to access the location. On that, excuse me, take a quick drink here. So one of the key things to think about is our assumption on most of the rescues is always going to be we're going to come from the top and work our way down to the location where the injured party or parties are. We may assess it and determine what intermediate access points can we utilize. In other words, can we drop in off of the trail somewhere and avoid rappels in the upper part of the canyon, and come in down at some intermediate point where we can make access to the individual and avoid a bunch of up canyon technical challenges that we'd have to spend time dealing with, right? So we may drop in with very long ropes. For instance, we have typically our rescue team, we're carrying the individual ropes we carry are 150 feet long, and it's 11 millimeter static KM3 blue water ropes that we utilize for the primary rescue ropes. But we also have 300-foot lengths that we utilize, and 600-foot lengths that we can utilize if necessary. Each of our primary rescue vehicles carries about half a mile of rope in them that we can apply. So we have plenty of rope, and everybody brings a rope when they head in, along with medical gear, litters, other stuff that we may need to effect the rescue. So we don't end up 30 minutes up the trail and find out we don't have something that we need, and then somebody has to go back and get it, or we have to wait for it to arrive on scene. We will always consider here in Southern California the use of a helicopter to effect the rescue. Helicopter is the fastest and most effective way to get in and get somebody out if there's a serious injury, or even if there's not a serious injury, but the access is challenging. We're very lucky here in Los Angeles County and in San Bernardino and Riverside County as well. We have a wide range of helicopters that are available to effect search and rescue operations, and they're almost all hoist equipped, and they have very, very skilled and experienced crews. In fact, the picture here on the right is LA County Sheriff's Department Air Rescue 5. This is actually not really a canyon rescue, although it's sort of it's in a canyon near Chantry Flats, doing a hoist extraction out of that area fairly recently. So they'll come in low and they will affect the hoist rescue if they can. And if you're below the helicopter, there's a lot of considerations for rotor wash and blowing debris and challenges around that we can talk about if you're interested. So the other things that we're thinking about is the stabilization plan. What medical care do we need to consider providing to the subject? Is this an advanced life support situation or a basic life support situation? Do we need to get paramedics in as part of the response crew? And we may arrange for that. So our team, we're all EMTs. We're not paramedics or anything, but if we have an ALS response, we may have paramedics from the fire department join up with us, and we'll bring the paramedics in and down canyon with us to provide medical support and care on site if necessary. And that entails potentially bringing a lot of medical equipment, drug boxes if we need pain meds or other advanced medical equipment with us. And you can imagine that dramatically complicates the access problem. So again, the more that we know from you about the patient, the more that we can tailor our response, particularly if we know that we've got an ambulatory or a non-ambulatory patient. If I have a non-ambulatory patient, I have to think about what it's going to take to get somebody out in a Stokes basket, in a litter, down the canyon and through multiple potentially technical problems, down waterfalls, down through flowing water and challenges like that will present themselves. So once we're on scene and we've figured out what the plan of attack is and we're dealing with the medical situation, as part of the response, we'll have developed an evacuation plan, which could include combinations of things, including descending to a point where we can extract out either by air or more efficiently on the ground, potentially ascending. We may go back up canyon in some cases. Or is there some alternative option that we need to consider as part of this, including sheltering in place, maybe? And we have had folks stranded in Eaton Canyon where high water resulted in some challenges where the original decision before an actual rescue was effected, the original decision was we were going to have people overnight and wait it out, and then we were going to pull them out in the daylight. But the Altadena Mountain Rescue Team, which is just west of Sierra Madre, they developed an alternative plan, and they were able to extract the folks that night and not have them remain overnight with rescuers and deal with hypothermia and other challenges. So the other thing that we have to think a lot about is it's not just the injured person or persons, but what about the other members of the party, and what do we need to do to effectively get them out safely and deal with any particular challenges they may be facing. A lot of times, again, everybody's going in, they're equipped for being in the water, so you've got a wetsuit or another gear, but very long time idling around in the canyon means even with a wetsuit, people may start to get hypothermic and start to have problems of their own. The folks that were not part of the original, injured party or the subjects of the call, now we may have multiple people that we have to start to deal with to try to keep them warm or rewarm them or get them out and out of environmental conditions that may be challenging while we effect the primary rescue of an injured party or something. So getting other people out becomes part of the key consideration. And it's also a very important part of the consideration if there's been a very serious accident and people may be emotionally traumatized or facing challenges themselves given the nature of an incident that occurred. And I think we saw a really good example of that recently in Heaps when there was a fatality there and the other members of the party had to hole up overnight at that last big drop before they could be safely evacuated the next day by the Park Service folks. So that's really, I think, a challenging situation and something should be in the back of your mind. If you had to stay an extended period of time, are you equipped to do that, and are you prepared to do that? All right. I mentioned the safety is always there. Risk mitigation, we're going to focus on looking at the location of injuries, location of the subject and nature of the injuries. Can we use a helicopter? What's the rescue complexity, and how long is it going to take to potentially affect this? And the information that you all share is quite important. One of the key things, and this is very unique with respect to the canyoneering community as well as some other more technically savvy recreational groups, is you may be quite helpful and useful in a rescue. Most of the time, any bystanders like other hikers, things like that, we are not going to look to press you into service in any way, shape, or form because we don't know who you are. We don't know anything about your skill set, and we're not going to gamble on something that you may say if we don't know you. It's just too much risk, and so a lot of times you'll end up in kind of a stand around, stand aside, let us do our job kind of mode. But a lot of the folks in the canyoneering community are people we know. They're people that are part of other rescue teams. And if you're in that kind of a situation, you can almost bet your bottom dollar that we are going to press you into service to help with the rescue. Whether it's helping on belays, it's helping with anchors, it's helping to manage lowering systems, or helping to move somebody that's in a litter across a pool. Be prepared to do that. And if you're not prepared to do that, don't hesitate to say, hey, I'm not comfortable. I'll hang back. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But if you're able and willing to help, let us know that, and we'll figure out how best to utilize your skill set on that. So a couple of other things just kind of organizationally to be aware of. The incident's really kind of broken up into a couple parts. With all the agencies that are responding, we establish a unified command where all the key incident people are working together so everybody knows what's going on and what's the game plan. And that's oftentimes at the trailhead. So it's way down the hill away from where the incident is and where the actual action is. What we do is we assign an on-the-hill operational leader or on-the-hill management role, and they really drive the operation. They coordinate everything that's going on. They figure out and coordinate and oversee the rescue plan. They oversee and coordinate the medical care, and they act as the primary point of contact down to the command post so we get resources up the hill that they ask for, and we also get updates from them on what's the situation. Because again, if you're 2 miles down the hill and have no visibility into the canyon where the rescue is occurring, you can't really direct it. It has to be done by people that are right there on scene on the hill. First thing we do is we send in what we call the bash crew. It's light and fast. They're carrying, again, the equipment they need to make access, particularly the medical gear that they may need to stabilize the patient. And they're going to give us a scene size up and a outline of a plan based on what they see and what we need to deal with. We're always looking at the big picture, and we will develop multiple plans. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes your first plan isn't going to work out, so you need to think of alternatives. And there's oftentimes kind of a plan A, B, and C that get worked on because you never quite know when, if you're counting on the helicopter and the helicopter can't affect the rescue because let's say the marine layers come in and now they don't have visibility. You got to have the plan B underway. Otherwise, the timeline extends really dramatically to complete the rescue. Equipment, as I mentioned, rope. You never have enough rope. And if you have rope that you don't need, that's okay. But you never want to not have enough rope. We will look to leapfrog and pre-rig drops and or raises. We'll put in guided rappels and high lines as necessary. And oftentimes we'll have a small group working directly with the patient, other groups moving down canyon to the next drop or rappel and setting up the system there so that when the litter gets to that spot, they're ready just to connect and go. And we're not spending a lot of time doing additional rigging, but that we're moving down the canyon and the litters with the patient is kind of continually moving down and making progress to getting out. We will potentially look to use your equipment if it's appropriate to do some of the things, particularly if we need to like belay or lower people that are not the injured party, but to get people down to the next point, we may utilize your equipment and keep our equipment for managing the rescuers and the litter because there's a lot more rescue load there, and we need to make sure that we're managing that. But we may leverage your equipment to help with access and moving people up and down if it's appropriate in the given situation. rescue loads and the anchors that we have to think about, it's very different than our traditional kind of canyoneering recreational descent mindset. We have to plan for very heavy loads on the ropes and the anchors, including sometimes not only the patient in a litter, but an attendant that has to go down with the litter, or even two attendants that have to go down with the litter. So we may be putting something on the order of a 400 to 600 pound load on the litter, in the anchors and the ropes that are set up on that. So oftentimes we'll use a dual rope lowering system or dual rope raising system so that we share the load across two ropes, and across two anchor sets if we can. And we'll utilize that to give us redundancy and a high safety factor to go down on there. So again, we don't use single rope technique very much if we're doing a rescue. We will do it for making access, but when we're doing the rescue, it's almost always a double rope type of approach for us to do that. We may extend anchors and take a look at different models of developing anchors, depending on what's happening in the situation. If we have poor anchor quality, we may have to run a anchor way up canyon and bring a 150-foot rope down off of like a solid tree that's a little bit up canyon, and bring the virtual anchor down off of that 150. So again, having lots of rope means we can extend and build anchors way up canyon and then bring the virtual anchor point down to where we need it to man the lowering system, and utilize all that rope. Again, we talked about ambulatory versus non-ambulatory patients and water flowing conditions, and the idea that is safe, is sheltering in place a viable option and something that we need to consider for everybody's safety. And again, safety is the thing that we're always looking for throughout this. We don't want to rush it, and we don't want to get somebody else hurt, and we want to make sure that we're looking out for everybody that's involved. Finally, here a couple other key items to note. Rescues in the San Gabriel are generally uncommon given the overall size of and how active the canyoneering community is. Most of what we see are extremity injuries that limit people's ability to move effectively in technical environments, or people that get hurt and the slides and jumps that we all enjoy so much sometimes don't always work out, and we end up with somebody with an injured ankle, for instance, or tib fib kind of issue, and now they're not in a life-threatening situation, but they're going to need help getting out of the canyon, and oftentimes their group can't affect that. Experience gaps are a big issue, particularly here in the LA area. We get a lot of newer people that are trying things out. They think this canyoneering thing is cool and they want to do it. And they find out that it takes a lot longer to run the canyon than they thought, or they make a mistake descending and get off route somewhere. That has happened several times in Eaton Canyon. Or things where they exceed their skill and ability and they're freaked out and they're locked up and they can't do a more complicated drop, and now they can't go up, they can't go down, and we've got a problem. People that are unfamiliar or not confident with their equipment, that's not super uncommon. And a huge one that we've got here is rockfall and environmental hazards. We've had people hit by rockfall. There was a good incident in Falling Leaf, hypothermia, as I mentioned, and hazards associated with water are huge. And fatigue, again, this goes back particularly to some of the less experienced parties, people that just don't have a good sense for the level of effort necessary to get up to and through a canyon. And all of a sudden, partway through, we've got people with significant exhaustion going on, and they need help getting out of the canyon. So they're not really hurt. A lot of times we end up just going in, hydrating them, getting them some food, some warm fluids, and then assisting them out just through sort of a supported set of rappels and descent down the canyon. Picture on the right here, this is in Bailey. This is the last waterfall in Bailey. This is somebody bringing down a litter patient over the edge here. As you can imagine, negotiating some of these waterfalls and the drops with somebody in a litter dropping over the edge right at the transition is quite sporting. And we don't carry high directionals, Arizona vortexes and things like that into the field. So we have different kind of techniques that we use to negotiate the edges, pikes and pivots and different things, or just some strong rescuers pulling up on the lines as the litter goes over the side is oftentimes enough to give enough of a pivot point there that allows the person tending the patient in the litter to get down over the falls. And this is a patient in this litter here that's they're wrapped up in one of those reflective mylar blankets to keep warm, as well as to keep the water off of them, because again, there's not a lot of flow in Bailey in this particular picture, but there is enough, and it takes time to get through it, that we don't want the subject to get soaked and then end up with a more complex hypothermia situation. So a little mylar blanket like that can wrap around them, can seal it up, and the water just kind of skims off like a cheap rain jacket. And at least it keeps them somewhat drier. So just a kind of a note on that picture. A lot of accidental canyoneers. I think one of the most famous ones here is Eric DeSplinter and Cucamonga Canyon. He and his girlfriend were missing for 5 days in April of 2019. Very extended search, difficult access. In fact, our rescue crews that were going on that went in the day that they were found, and they located them in Cucamonga Canyon, because of snow and ice up high, they had to carry ice axes and crampons and winter mountaineering gear, along with the ropes and other gear, wetsuits, etc., that they would need to descend the canyon. So they had packs that were on the order of about 60 pounds of rescue-related gear just to make access to the canyon. They worked their way down, went over a couple of waterfalls, and then spotted Eric and his girlfriend in a small fire that they had lit, stranded between two waterfalls, and they were actually able to guide a helicopter in. Luckily, the winds had abated enough that they were able to effect a helicopter hoist extraction at night to get them out after 5 days up there. But one of the challenges, and again, they weren't canyoneers, they had not intended to go down the canyon, and had gotten stranded after dropping down a couple of waterfalls using their jackets tied together as ropes. But it was very difficult access from a search and rescue standpoint because of the snow and ice that we had to deal with. Korean War veterans. This is an interesting one in that there are a number of folks in the Korean community here in Los Angeles that are Korean War veterans. So these are gentlemen in their late 70s and their 80s. A lot of times they were members of Korean Special Forces, and these guys are some of the toughest people I have ever seen. And they have gotten down in these canyons, they've gotten across waterfalls, and they have typically gotten themselves hung up in technical terrain that required substantial efforts to rescue. But these guys are some of the toughest people I have ever seen. And their ability to survive in difficult circumstances is second to none. It's been amazing. I mentioned high water in Eaton Canyon. And then in Rubio, there was an incident, and Sonny Lawrence was part of this, where a hiker had run into trouble after getting into the canyon, and some of the folks that were canyoneers, members of some other search and rescue teams, actually affected the rescue in Rubio of this individual. A couple notable incidents. We had in LSA, somebody right at one of the drops was getting ready to go over the side, and a rattlesnake popped out or became visible on the rock right at I think it was the number 3 rappel, if I remember right. They freaked out. They were not tethered in, and they literally jumped back and jumped over the edge and took a pretty nasty fall because of the rattlesnake. And we ended up having to do the rescue on that individual after they fell off the waterfall because of the snake. So tethers, things like that are probably a good idea working anywhere close to the edge. I think personally, I like the idea of a tether. And this rattlesnake rescue was one that kind of reinforced that to me, that something unusual happens at the edge, and if you're not tied in, you run the risk of taking the big fall. Does your dog bite? There have been at least 2 instances where canyoneers have been bitten by dogs that were not leashed and were freaked out by canyoneers in wetsuits and all the kind of accoutrements and gear that they carry. It freaked the dogs out. And we had one gentleman bit in the groin and another gentleman bit on the leg. So so dogs are sort of unusual in some cases, particularly in the drop-in points in some of these canyons. And then probably one of the more unusual ones that we had was in the Chantry area, where we had one of the pack trains out of the Adams Pack Station go over the side into the canyon bottom off of one of the trails. And so we ended up rescuing mules and a horse. We pulled the horse out by helicopter the next day. It was quite unusual. So those are kind of not really canyoneering per se, or more unusual canyoneering, more accurately. So the Eaton Fire. Couple of key things here. Started on the 7th near the Pinecrest Gate at the bottom there of Eaton Canyon. The Santa Ana winds created extremely rapid fire spread, some of the most aggressive fire spread I've ever seen in my life. Resources were already strained due to the Palisade fire. And as a result of that, we've had hundreds of homes, probably closer to 1,000 homes in the Altadena area, and probably 1,000 structures or homes in the Palisades area lost, as well as many outbuildings. And it has burned up all of the canyon areas here, including Rubio, Eaton Canyon, Little Santa Anita, Bailey Canyon, and a number of those areas. We do not have a full assessment of the damage at this time. Everything is closed, but it will have an impact on some of the roundups that people have planned. Like Chris, I know you're on, and others. This will affect that, and we expect wide-ranging closures and challenges, particularly after the rains come through. Here's a couple pictures. Top left here, this is the bridge. Here's the bridge you can see. That's looking up Eaton Canyon. This is on the 10th. You can still see some fire burning up there. The bottom left picture here, this is the dry sloughs we're already starting to see down the hill after everything's burned off. So without any rain at all, once the vegetation's gone, some of the hillsides start to slide down the hill right away. And then this is the sign right after you start up the trail at the road's end there at Little Santa Anita, going up Mount Wilson Trail. That's a little bit of what it looks like starting up the hill there. You can see it's thoroughly burned at this point in time. But these are satellite images from Friday. On the left here is Little Santa Anita. This is Rescue Ridge here. The canyon you can see kind of runs down the bottom here. The main entry points up here at First Water, those are all trees. So the upper area up in there, First Water and the drop-in point, a lot of the trees were not burned. The area survived pretty well in there, but we've got all these bare slopes here on Canyon right and Canyon left, where when it starts to rain, we can expect to have lots of debris flowing down into the canyon and really wreaking havoc in there. And then on the right here on Eaton Canyon is the same thing. This is the bridge down here in the very bottom kind of left-hand corner. There are trees still up in the canyon that did not burn based on the way that the fire blew across and moved through the area. But again, all the slopes up above, everything is totally denuded. It's like a moonscape. The trees and the brush and everything is basically vaporized. There's not even really like, ash per se. It's just they're gone. So these hills are bare dirt at this point. And that's it. I thank you very much. This took a little bit longer than I thought, but I'm happy to entertain any questions that the group has, and I'll stop the sharing. Chris, I see you have your hand up. And I'm not hearing audio, Cam, if... I see one question that so Chris is can we use what 3 words to identify or pinpoint? Yes, we will use what 3 words. So don't hesitate if you've got the what 3 word information, pass that along, and we will absolutely use that to locate your position. Lat long, UTM, we can make use of pretty much any coordinate frame of reference. Just give us what you've got and we'll figure it out. But what 3 words works really well now. It's straightforward. It's not complicated like, lat long and decimal minutes and things like that. Ashed, you're asking what three words? There's a program developed in the UK originally, if I understand correctly, where what they've done is they've created a unique three-word reference to geographic points all over the world. And if you pull up a point on the What Three Words app, it will show you what three words are associated with that location. So if you have a problem and you tell a 911 operator, you can say, I'm at Apple, King, Dog, and they have a way to then take those three words and generate a exact geographic location on that. My team, we have a number of people that do cave rescue that are part of kind of a composite team. So we do that as well. And we also do mine rescue. LA County has one of the few certified mine rescue teams in the state of California. To answer another one of Chris's questions. Other questions from the group for me? We talked what three words? Yeah, I agree with Chris. I think there's probably 10 to 12 canyons in the Front Range that are going to be out of commission for a while. And again, as we do some assessments, I'm happy to share what we find with the group about conditions on there. But it's going to be pretty dynamic for a while. And yes, Dustin, yeah, the tether, like a third hand or a PSA or a PAS is sometimes called, is definitely something that's worth using. I use the PAS myself just because it's flexible and it gives me a lot of opportunities to change how I'm connecting in. So I utilize that. Yeah, I see somebody said they've seen their fair share of rattlesnakes in LSA. Yeah, definitely on that. Yeah, we will use high lines or guided rappels and similar kinds of systems in the lowerings that we have to do on this, mainly to try to keep people out of the water if we can, because we don't want to get patients, particularly in a litter, inside a waterfall and flowing water. Particularly because it just increases the risk so dramatically because of the forces involved with flowing water. And if something gets hung up and we have somebody that's strapped into a litter and they're in the flowing water, now we have a major, major problem with somebody potentially drowning. That's bad news. Yeah, and we can definitely add slack, and we can do all kinds of cool things to tension and release the line to adjust where somebody's going to land or how they're going to come down off the how steep a descent angle we need to make and things like that. So a high line and variations of the high line are fairly complicated tools that we can use if we need them. So I'm just looking back through the questions here and see other things. It's interesting. Somebody's asking here, Casey's asking, what canyon do we spend most of the time pulling people out of? With the rescue teams in LA County, Eaton Canyon is a pretty busy one for the Altadena rescue team. We support them as a mutual aid resource in there. Otherwise, most of the other canyons are relatively quiet, actually. San Antonio at Baldy can see quite a bit of action depending on kind of what's going on there with snow and ice and cold water. So there's stuff that goes on there. The rescue teams really work closely together. If somebody, if a team says, hey, we need additional bodies to effect a rescue, it's really easy to spin up a mutual aid request and get another team rolling to help somebody. So we're really lucky in Southern California that we have a lot of really strong rescue teams to work in the canyons. But yeah, Eaton Canyon sees a fair amount just because of all the hikers that go in there and try to climb up around and get hung up above the last waterfall. There's problems. All right, so I will. Let's see. I need to hand back to Cam.
I was able to get it. I
Oh, you were
found the
able. Okay,
button.
sorry.
Found the button.
Thank you.
Well, that was fantastic. Thank you for that. It's crazy to think about how methodical everything is from the maybe a button push to somebody showing up at you got where the person is. So what great information, especially about the fires and stuff. So that being said, I do want to make two announcements that we're going to be doing two other presentations this year along with others, but so far we're going to do a presentation, a Zoom on the harness tethers by Justin Wheaton, and he teaches technical rope skills. And so we can go into detail more, and you can learn more about tethers and just get real deep into the nerd alert scientific side of that. And then also on Canyon Gar. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar on Gar, learning the green, amber, and red, how you guys are feeling at the trailhead. There's not a canyoneering Gar. How do you talk to each other at the trailhead? And we're really excited to have that decision making ability come together in kind of a list of forms, so there's less pressure trying to come up with a conversation. It's going to be kind of spelled out for you. And we have somebody else, another member of Search and Rescue. His name is Richard Yoakum, that is going to be doing that. And so we have two great presentations so far to keep the conversation going about safety. How can we prevent this at the trailhead before we even go? And then what does happen when you do have to push a button? So I've really enjoyed it. And I do believe we have some more questions. Um, One about the
Yeah.
Zoom calls posted. We right now have them on our YouTube page. And if you join on our website, the Coalition of American Canyoneers.org, um, we will be emailing it out, but we will also be putting it on our YouTube. Let's see here. Any other questions?
Um, yeah, so somebody's asking about a ham radio. So typically, we're not usually on the standard ham radio frequencies because we're working off of public safety channels that we've got. If somebody's got a ham radio in the canyon and and you can tell us what frequency you're on, we can come up on those frequencies. Typically, we can get to that. I mentioned earlier in the comments, one of the things that works really well, and we use them for kind of crew to crew communications if we don't want to be on the primary frequency, is the FRS radios, and the Rocky Talkies are really quite good. They're durable. They have good range. They're highly functional. If we know a group is on Rocky Talkie, has a FRS radio, let's say it's a Rocky Talkie, and we know what frequency and privacy code they're on, we'll come up on that channel and we'll talk to you as we kind of get to the scene or what have you.
Okay, well, I think we have got all the questions answered. Do look for us on YouTube as well as our email list, and we'll look forward to seeing you in more presentations. And thank you again, Rob. That was amazing. Really enjoyed that, and so much work goes into helping us enjoy the outdoors. So thank you for sharing that with us. So stay safe out there, guys. Enjoy your 2025, and we'll be seeing you more often. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.